This is DJ Gel, and you are listening to 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave, diverse music for your diverse mind. Please stay tuned, because at noon we will have the news, the weather, and then after a short break, GameBabble Live, your video game news and information show here on 89.5 FM, which I do every week on Wednesday from noon to 3 p.m. Wouldn't you just know it, after my show last week, a Nintendo Direct hit, and maybe the Nintendo Switch has games on the horizon? Find out on GameBabble Live today, shortly after the noon news. So please stay tuned to 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Thank you so much for listening. Currently, it is 79 degrees here on the campus of Florissant Valley Community College. I'm Gel with your noon news update. In local news, 2 men who robbed an armored truck are going to prison. Former Dunbar Armored Car Company employee Shane Jones and his cousin Charles Johnson pleaded guilty back in December to the 2016 robbery. They made off with over $2 million during the heist. They were each sentenced yesterday to serve 12 years in prison. Over a dozen guns confiscated in a raid. Over a dozen guns are off the street thanks to the St. Clair County Sheriff's Department. The department's drug tactical unit recently busted a man in East Crondelay. He was in possession of marijuana and multiple guns and ammunitions. The drug tactical unit says it's already confiscated as many guns this year as it did throughout all of 2016. And man charged for Woodson Terrace shooting. A man is facing charges in connection to a shooting in Woodson Terrace. The shooting happened early Monday morning in the 9300 block of Tutwiler Avenue. Jeremy Fontaine has been charged with assault and armed criminal actions. And new tickets released for Lady Gaga concert. Lady Gaga fans are excited for her show in St. Louis. The pop star is scheduled to bring her Joan World Tour to the Scott Trade Center on November 16th. New tickets are being released for the show. They are for the sides of the stage and on the general admission floor. In national news, the Vice President has a new warning for North Korea. Speaking aboard the USS Ronald Reagan near Tokyo today, Mike Pence called North Korea's nuclear weapons programs the most dangerous and urgent threat to the peace and security of the Asia-Pacific. He said the American shield stands guard and the sword stands ready. A high-profile separation of church and state case goes before the U.S. Supreme Court today. At issue is whether a church faced discrimination when it was excluded from a Missouri program that provides public money for playgrounds. The High Court is now up to full strength with Neil Gorsuch in place, and the newest justice could be the deciding vote in a possible divided decision. Former President George H.W. Bush is back in the hospital for pneumonia. A spokesman says he was admitted to Houston Methodist Hospital Friday and is in good spirits and resting. The 92-year-old was placed in intensive care back in January for a respiratory problem related to pneumonia. The hospitalization kept Bush from attending President Trump's inauguration. And Bill O'Reilly's future at Fox News may be up in the air. New York Magazine reports members of the network's controlling Murdoch family have been discussing whether to keep O'Reilly on board following reports he paid out millions of dollars to settle sexual harassment allegations. O'Reilly is currently on vacation. He's scheduled to return to his highly rated show, The O'Reilly Factor, next week. Also, in campus news, there's apparently a trio financial responsibility workshop today from 1 to 2 p.m. So if you want to learn about some financial responsibility, come on down to Flo Valley Community College and, 1 to 2 p.m. This piece of paper doesn't have a lot on it. PDR-A. Okay, that's happening. Ask around. Moving on, let's talk about the weather. Ah, yes, the weather. Today, it is partly cloudy with a high of 86 and a low of 68. Isn't that convenient? Tomorrow, we've got thunderstorms in the evening with a high of 75 and a low of 52. Things start to cool down as we get some rain on Friday with a high of 59 and a low of 45. And it reaches the coldest on Saturday when we've got rain and wind, giving us a high of only 51 and a low of 45. But You know, after a couple weeks ago, I'll take 51. 51 ain't too bad. Sunday, though, hey, guess what? It's sunny. High of 69, low of 47. So, it's about how things go. And as we get back into the week, it's going to warm up and we'll be in the 70s and everything will be nice again. Actually, let me double check. How much rain are we looking at next week? Sunny, mostly sunny. Yeah, they're not really looking at any rain until next Friday. So yeah, it's gonna be a beautiful week next week. Please enjoy. Either way, I do believe that concludes our news and weather. So now I have to ask you to please stay tuned to 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave, diverse music for your diverse mind, for GameBabble Live, our video game news and information show, which airs every Wednesday from noon-ish to 3 p.m., where I talk about latest game releases, what anime is in theaters, and then I start talking about latest video game headlines this week. Hey, guess what? After last week's show, Nintendo did a Nintendo Direct. Are games coming to the Nintendo Switch? Stay tuned to this channel to find out. Until then, please enjoy a quick song, namely a song called Crusade by Thorhammer. And when we get back, I'll tell you what's up. Please enjoy, and thank you for listening to 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Thank you. Hello, this is DJ Gel, and you are listening to 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave, and this is GameBabble Live, our weekly video game news and information show, which airs every Wednesday from noon to 3 p.m. I'm your host, Gel, and now it is time for the weekly game releases. Where to begin? How about the PlayStation 4? Let's see. This week on PlayStation 4, ATV Renegades came out. Call of Duty Infinite Warfare Continuum, I assume that's an expansion pack. Game called Flint Hook, Full Throttle Remastered, which is a remake of an old LucasArts point-and-click adventure game that was, well, not a remake, more just an HD-ifying of an old LucasArts point-and-click adventure game involving bikers. HeroCade came out for the PlayStation VR, which is a collection of 9 VR games in one package. We will talk about that later because I'm definitely going to say not as good as I hoped. Also a game called Late Shift. Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy Episode 1 Tangled Up in Blue, which is a modern point-and-click adventure, or should be, from Telltale Games, people who do the Walking Dead video games that everyone loves. Mech Runner, which actually that one's got me pretty intrigued. It's an endless runner where you're in a giant robot and you actually stop running and shoot at things and blow things up. So it looks like almost like a combination of an endless runner and Space Invaders. Game called Rise and Shine from Adult Swim Games, which is a side-scrolling kind of Metal Slug Contra-y shooter that makes fun of recent video game trends. I don't know, I don't think it does a very good job of making fun of recent video game trends, but it does look like a fun game. And Shinas the Lightning Kingdom, which is an indie action RPG that was kickstarted a while back. It's out now. Looks pretty alright. There's definitely a part of me that's intrigued by it. And a game called Spear of Destiny. Also the Disney Afternoon Collection, which is a collection of all of Capcom's old Disney NES games. So that's DuckTales 1 and 2, Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers 1 and 2, Darkwing Duck, and Tailspin. All the NES games in a nice pack if you want to play those on PS4, and I'm pretty certain it's on Xbox One as well. Don't think it's on Switch. They should fix that. Also, The Silver Case, VR Invaders, of course, is another PlayStation VR release, and Wonder Boy the Dragon's Trap, remake of Wonder Boy 3. We talked a little bit about that last week, and I'll go into more detail this week, but that's out on PS4, Xbox One, and Switch. And also, today, a VR game called Bandit 6 Combined Arms is supposed to be out, and then tomorrow, Arcade Archives Art of Fighting. So, that is... Oh, and then day after tomorrow, Dark Souls 3, The Fire Fades Edition. So I guess that's the complete one with all the DLC, I assume. I don't know. Let's move on to the Xbox One. Let's see, Xbox One, ATV Renegades, Flint Hook, Late Shift, Guardians of the Galaxy Episode 1, She-Ness the Lightning Kingdom, Disney Afternoon Collection. Okay, that's weird. Voodoo Vince Remastered. Who asked for a remaster of Voodoo Vince? That was a 3D platformer on the original Xbox where you played a voodoo doll. Well, Xbox One exclusive. Voodoo Vince Remastered. And yeah, Wonder Boy 3 Dragon's Trap. And then on the 21st, there's something called Verlor Verstand. Okay. Cities Skylines Xbox One Edition, which Cities Skylines is like a very SimCity-esque game, but not SimCity. Dark Souls 3 Fire Fates Edition and Race the Sun actually makes it to Xbox One. Moving on. Hey, look at this. Something's coming out on Wii U tomorrow. Looks like a bunch of downloadables. We got Booty Diver, Mop Operation Cleanup, Orbit, and Wind Kings. I know nothing about any of these. What? Okay. The Wii U is still getting a couple indie games, though. Just, it ain't even gonna give up. It ain't. Also, apparently a game called Demo... Actually, I need to double check and see if that got pushed back, but according to this, Demo the Last Recital came out for PlayStation Vita yesterday. That's a very artsy-looking music game that's on, like, iPhone, Android, and Vita, and kind of interested. Full Throttle Remastered also came out on Vita. 3DS! Runbow Pocket came out yesterday. And then tomorrow, Don't Crash Go comes out. And, let's see. Nintendo Switch, Wonder Boy the Dragon's Trap came out. Told you that. Okay. That is all the stuff for this week. How about next week? Well, let's see. Next week on PlayStation 4, Dragon Quest Heroes 2 comes out. Game called Locke's Quest. Outlast 2. Outlast Trinity. And Puyo Puyo Tetris. Oh, we're going to talk about that. Sniper Ghost Warrior 3. Siberia 3. Valhalla Hills Definitive Edition. And What Remains of Edith Finch. All come out next week. And then a little after that, Little Nightmares and Nova 111 on PlayStation 4. On Xbox One next week, Locke's Quest, Outlast 2, Outlast Trinity, Sniper Ghost Warrior 3, Siberia 3, Valhalla Hills Definitive Edition, and then Little Nightmares and Valhalla Hills Definitive Edition. I have a good list of game releases. It's very functional. Okay, moving on. Anything next week for Wii U? Oh, Use Your Words comes out for Wii U next week. I think people are kind of liking that. I know nothing about it. Nothing on Vita next week. 3DS next week. Nothing. Okay. And Nintendo Switch next week. Puyo Puyo Tetris. And then, let me double check this. That's next week? Yeah, next Friday. Good. Constructor and Mario Kart 8 Deluxe come out on Switch next Friday. For Puyo Puyo Tetris and Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. We got some Switch games a-coming. Now then, the Anime in Theaters report. Let me pull this up. I usually do this on computer, but this time I did it on paper because I decided to get to bed early-ish last night. So let's see. Anime in Theaters. Good news. If you haven't seen Your Name, which is apparently the highest-grossing anime film of all time, it is really sticking around in theaters. Looks like you'll be able to see it until Tuesday, April 25th at the Tivoli and the De Pere Theater. Guaranteed. Mind you, I'm only seeing like one showtime a day at Then again, I was looking at the subtitled one. So I was only seeing one showtime for the subtitled one at De Pere a day. And you've got until tomorrow at the Regal 18, where we've got multiple showtimes. Good times. Then, Wednesday the 26th, so that should be, Jeez, I'm good with time. That should be next week, right? Yeah, next Wednesday, 7 p.m., Cabaneri of the, I always get the Over In confused. Cabaneri in the Iron Fortress, I think. Whatever, Cabaneri in the Iron Fortress, double feature, 2 movies. It's part of Crunchyroll's anime movie night. It recaps the plot of the series. We're using some animation and adding in some new animation. Anyway, it is a one-time showing thing. It's one of those Fathom events, I think. Fathom-esque event, anyway. And so, 7 p.m., but the good news, it will be at, like, all the Warenbergs and probably some other theaters, too. It's one showtime, so be there if you want to see it. And then in May 12th and 13th, My Neighbor Totoro will be at the Tivoli, subtitled at midnight. I know there's a noon showing that might be dubbed. I think that's, like, noon on Sunday. But, yeah, Saturday and Sunday, May 12th and 13th. So, next month. My Neighbor Totoro at the Tivoli at midnight. Bleh. Okay. So that concludes our upcoming game releases, as well as the Anime in Theaters report. Now, a very brief break, so that way we can get some local artists in here. Next up is Telephone by William H., a local artist. And I hope you enjoy it. And after that, we will talk about the Nintendo Direct last week, and if the Nintendo Switch is finally getting some games. So, please stay tuned to 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. Thank you for listening. That was Telephone by William H., and you are listening to 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind, and this is GameBabble Live, our weekly video game news and information show which airs every Wednesday from noon to 3 p.m. I'm your host, Joe. And before the break, we talked about the new releases and the Anime in Theater, which is our weekly feature we always do at the top of the show. Now it's time to talk about Nintendo, because last week, shortly after my show, Nintendo did a Nintendo Direct, which is, of course, their big internet broadcast thing where they announce stuff. And they did a pretty nice one. And it's like, hey, could there be games coming to the Nintendo Switch? Well, darn well nearly, though the most interesting ones are on the 3DS. Namely, I'm super interested in Ever Oasis, which is some kind of town-building action RPG where there's like an oasis in the desert, and you're building up a town around it, and you're helping all these people out. You've got your character, you've got all these different people, and you're talking to it looks really, really good. And I can't help but look at it on 3DS and go, why isn't this on Switch? Like, I'm not saying cancel the 3DS release. That would be stupid. I'm saying, why don't they do, like, some 3DS Switch simultaneous releases? See, this is a problem. This is one of the problems with Nintendo Switch. You didn't put in backwards compatibility with the 3DS. Like, I understand you couldn't do Wii U because that's disc and you're using cartridges, but egad, if the Switch could have played DS and 3DS games, we pretty much wouldn't be having this problem of people sitting around going, so when's the new game going to come out? Because they could just play their 3DS games, and it would be so nice to play 3DS games on a TV screen. And I know the 3DS, 3D and the dual screens, you could make it work, trust me. There are ways. Where there's a will, there's a way, dang it. And even not doing that, they should have put Ever Oasis on the Switch. I would love a Switch version of Ever Oasis. And you know what else I'd love a Switch version of that's coming to DS? Cul-de-Cept Revolt, which I'm super happy about. If you've never played Cul-de-Cept, that's coming to the 3DS. That'll be in August. Cul-de-Cept is basically a combination of Monopoly and Magic the Gathering. Basically, imagine Monopoly, but instead of like putting little houses on the different squares, you summon monsters to them. And then when someone lands on that square, they either have to pay you or they have to beat your monster and take that square from you. And then each monster, it's a card, you got a deck, you customize your deck, and then each monster has different special effects. Like, I remember there was one, like, really weak little fuzzball monster that if you moved it, it would just multiply itself. So it was a really easy way to capture, like, a bunch of different squares. And I remember there was a card called Corn Folk, and that's me and my friend's favorite card, because it's literally a man made out of corn. I don't remember anything else about it, it's just Corn Folk. Anyway, Cul-de-Cept Revolt on the 3DS will have online play. It's looking very nice. And it has art by Kinu Nishimura. You might not know her name, but she is the person who did the art for Capcom vs. SNK. She did the Capcom side art. She did the art for Code of Princess. And she also did the art for the Nonary Saga games. the Nonary games, which is, oh Lord, I have to remember the names now. 9 somethings, 9 doors, 9. I need to look it up. Jeez, I can't remember the names of them. I should play them. They're supposed to be really good visual novelty type of games that are on the 3DS, and they've recently been ported to PS4, and they're supposed to be super great, and they've got her art, and she's just a great artist, so super happy to see her art there. Funny story, she actually did, Cul-de-Cep's actually pretty popular in Japan, there's a few knockoffs. She actually did the art for a Cul-de-Cep knockoff for Capcom called Gaia Masters. Love the art for that game. Mostly I just like Meg the Barbarian, because Meg is a fantastic name for a barbarian. Anyway, so yeah, Ever Oasis, Cul-de-Cep's Revolt, and as if that wasn't enough, hey, Fire Emblem Echoes, and that's where I have to draw the line. Nintendo knows Fire Emblem is like kind of a thing, and it would be so nice if it got an actual proper translation this time, I'm just saying. But Nintendo knows that Fire Emblem, that's like their big rising up and coming series. It's got some serious fans. They've got a new one on the horizon. And I'm just sitting there going, so why not Switch? Like, I understand not doing it Switch exclusive. You want to do Switch exclusive. You want to really pretty up those graphics, make it super fancy, make it nice. And I expect them to friggin' do that. But I don't think there's any shame in saying, oh, this will be on 3DS and Switch. It's the thing you should do, Nintendo. I'm just saying. But, oh, and also there's a game called Miitopia for 3DS coming out, which is, it's kind of a hyper-advanced version of Find Me. It's a big RPG thing where you use the Miis of you and your friends, and they, like, work in, all your friends' Miis work in a town, and they've got different relationship levels which determine how they behave in battle, and it's like taking Find Me and combining it with that, with Tomodachi Life. It's like Tomodachi Life if it was an RPG, so that looks neat. And then there's, also on 3DS, there's going to be a side-scrolling 2D Pikmin game called Hey Pikmin. All this looks really nice. All this, I say, why isn't this on Switch? But, at least coming soon to Switch, we have Puyo Puyo Tetris, which we'll talk a good bit more about that shortly. Also, Splatoon 2 will have a Horde mode, which, okay, looks nice. It's about, like, collecting fish eggs and having to fight off waves of killer fish walking on land. Look, it looks like a thing. Looks like a thing. Also, ARMS, they showed a lot more of that. That's coming out, I think they said ARMS is June and Splatoon is May. I need to double check that. But ARMS, they revealed a new character, a Chinese girl named Min Min, who has ramen noodles for arms, and then one of her arms turns into a dragon? So that's a thing, and also it'll have 2-on-2 versus, which that looks super fun. ARMS is really shaping up. That's the game I bought the Switch for, and it makes me super excited. I'm really excited to play ARMS. I hope it's as good as I think it's going to be. Also, they revealed a game called NBA Playgrounds, which is sort of a goofy, cartoony, super deformed NBA basketball game. That'll be coming out, likely exclusively for Switch, at least initially. And I look at it and I go, so is this going to be like NBA Street? Because I'm going to be honest, I don't play a lot of basketball games, but NBA Street was really, really, really stupid good. And if this is basically NBA Street 4, that could be a thing, but didn't get enough information to really make a call there. There's also going to be a Namco Museum for the Switch, which, the Namco Museum series these days kind of annoys me, because the reason it's called Namco Museum is when the series started, back on PS1, there was actually a museum. Like, in the game, they had this big 3D museum with different exhibits for each of the games, and you could look at what their motherboards looked like, and the old instruction manuals, and all the sprites, and all the secrets, all the promotional materials were all scanned in there, and I would spend hours just roaming around those PS1 museums. I friggin' loved them. I own all the Namco museums, including the Japanese-only one, which actually wound up sucking horribly. But the old PS1 Namco museums were great, but ever since then, they've just been, here's a collection of old Namco games. Obviously, Namco Museum is going to contain your Pac-Man, Ms. Pac-Man, Galaga, all that good stuff. So, yeah, that's all there. But what's the interesting stuff? What's the twists? I would say the twists for Namco Museum on the Switch is, first of all, Rolling Thunder 2. I think it's both Rolling Thunder 1 and 2. But yeah, Rolling Thunder 2 will be on there. Galaga 88, which if you've never played that one, that's one of the few that can really follow in the footsteps of the original, and I'll probably wind up picking up Namco Museum on Switch almost exclusively for that. That's the one. It's got kind of a cartoony style, and it's got, like, the inflatable invaders, and you can actually, you know how you can get your ship captured by one of the enemies, and then you rescue it, and then you have double shot? You can actually get triple shot in that one. Get a double shot captured by an enemy, and the two ships merge together, and then you rescue that, and it all merges together into a giant triple shot ship. And it has, like, I think it has multiple paths and endings, too. Galaga 88's pretty nutty. And also Splatterhouse. So kind of surprising to see that, although I am seeing green blood in the trailers. I'm wondering if there's a way to switch it to red blood, or what the deal is. If you're unfamiliar, Splatterhouse is a very, kind of, side-scrolling action game, but the twist was that it had a horror movie theme and was kind of the Mortal Kombat before Mortal Kombat. You pretty much played a guy who looked like Jason Voorhees, and you, like, chopped enemies in half and blood flew everywhere and they splattered against the screen. It was a thing back then, Either way, it'll be nice to have another proper arcade port of that, because prior to this, the only faithful arcade ports of Splatterhouse was on home consoles was number one, the one that came with the Splatterhouse remake, which really was not that bad. It wasn't great, but it was not that bad, especially considering its troubled development history. And the one on the FM Towns Marty. Apparently that was the Marty's claim to fame. FM Towns Marty is a really obscure Japanese console, and when I mentioned it, people were like, do you have Splatterhouse? I'm like, no, I got it for the Dragon Half video game. Okay. So, Namco Museum for the Switch, that looks real nice. Let's see, mentioned Splatoon, mentioned ARMS. Hey, they're going to put Monopoly on the Switch, which that'll be a thing. Ooh, we're going to use the HD Rumble so it can really feel like you're rolling dice in a cup. And you can put the Switch down on the table and it'll be just like a little digital Monopoly board. Okay, that's neat. Nah, that can't be it. Wasn't there something more here? Oh, good lord. No, that about covers it. Just Splatoon 2 and ARMS are coming real soon. At least we've got some ports. Let me pull this back up. Because I know we've got a port of Disgaea 5 coming to the Switch super soonish, like this summer. So let me pull that release list back up. Let's see, May, Minecraft Switch Edition. Oh yeah, they did show Minecraft Switch Edition. That is a thing. Yeah, end of May 23rd. Disgaea 5 complete. And then after that, Ultra Street Fighter 2, the final ripoff. Seriously, that actually kind of disgusts me. If you're unfamiliar, Ultra Street Fighter 2, the final challengers, is them taking the old Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo HD remix. They're re-releasing, which was like a $15, $20 game. They're re-releasing that, but they're adding in Evil Ryu and Violent Ken, dramatic battle mode, and some kind of weird first-person motion-controlled Hadouken throwing mode, and they're charging full price for it. For a few add-ons to an old $20 download-only game. Yeah. Yeah, there we go. June 13th, Cars 3 Driven to Win. June 16th, ARMS. And then June 20th, Cave Story Plus and Redout. Then June 27th, Minecraft Story Mode, a Telltale game series, the complete series. Okay. And then July 21st for Splatoon 2? Well, and then Fate Extella, the Umbral Star, will also be on Switch in July. And hey, August! They're like, hey, Sonic Mania. Oh, and, though they are doing that NBA Playgrounds thing, NBA 2K18 will be on the Switch September 30th. So it's not like that's supposed to be their replacement for the yearly stuff. And I just noticed the time. Rambling for a while. So let me just, I feel bad for skipping that one. Okay, let me get you back to some, diverse PSAs for your diverse mind, because I'm running a little late on those. And then when we get back, we will continue talking about how strange Nintendo is, because I've noticed a few other things. And then after that, hey, keep the Nintendo theme going. We'll talk about Wonder Boy 3 Remake. So, please stay tuned to 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave, diverse music and PSAs for your diverse mind. And we'll be right back to GameBabble Live after a short break. Thank you so much for listening. That was I Love Music by LG, and this is 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave, diverse music for your diverse mind. I'm Jell. This is GameBabble Live, our video game news and information show which airs every Wednesday from noon to 3 p.m. And now it's time to continue scratching our head at Nintendo. Because on top of all this Switch stuff, hey, guess what? You know that NES Classic, the thing that's been sold out ever since Christmas, and everyone's trying to get one? It's like $300 on eBay. Well, it's going to probably be like $1,000 on eBay now. Why is that? Well, believe it or not, Nintendo just announced that the last shipments of NES Classics are going out. They are discontinuing the system. Even though they know that they can't keep the thing on shelves and that it is selling like hotcakes. What? So everyone's baffled by this, and baffled even more by the fact that the Famicom Classic, the Japanese one, they are not discontinuing. They're still going to make a few more of those. But they were saying the NES Classic was meant to be a limited time product. But wait, the Famicom Classic wasn't? Is this another case of you guys screwing over America because that's what you do, Nintendo? Okay. Even still, this is just such a baffling decision, because it's like, the Nintendo Switch is in such a weird place. Like, they keep saying, oh, it's selling so great. And it's like, yeah, but there's, like, no games on it, and everyone's complaining about that, and the Wii U did really poorly, and this is it was either last year or the year before where Nintendo was in the red for the first time in their company history, and you have a product that's selling so well you can't keep it on the shelves, and they've shipped so very few NES Classics. Like, most stores only got one or two of the things in, and they're not expensive to produce. Nintendo, like, a lot of us know the approximate cost of building an NES Classic, and Nintendo should have been making money hand over fist with that thing. So none of this makes sense. And this is a surprise to, like, everyone, because there were a bunch of third-party companies making accessories for the NES Classic. Like, there's a third-party wireless NES controller. There's a third-party remake of the NES Advantage. And you can, like, use those with the Wii and the Wii U, because they're just classic controllers. But, like, those companies have to feel really confused, because there's all these NES Classic accessories that came out, and Nintendo's now like, oh yeah, no, that was a limited-time product. We never intended to do more than a few shipments. In fact, we were going to discontinue this earlier, but people just kept buying them, and it's like, what? Like, none of this makes sense, except I think I figured it out. There was a little tiny detail in what they said. They said, this will be the last shipment. Here's the key word. Official statement from Nintendo. This will be the last shipment for the year. Are the gears turning? Are you getting what they're gonna do? Basically, here's my theory, just a theory, a game theory, yes, a game theory. Okay, here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking next year, around Christmas time, they're gonna release a new NES Classic with 30 different games. And every year, for as long as they can get away with it, they'll release a new NES Classic with 30 different games. And now everyone knows, oh, it's a limited time product. It will only be available around Christmas time. Which actually almost makes sense, because if you've ever been to a mall around Christmas, there's usually a CD vendor selling bootleg NESs with a bunch of games built into it around Christmas time, like, every year. Like, that is a thing that happens. I remember one year I bought one because it was an NES shaped like a PS2, and all the games were just standard bootleg games except for one, which was a copy of Creon Conquest, except they replaced the main character with Suicune from Pokemon, which was weird. But anyway, the tradition of having bootleg NESs being sold around Christmas time, like, that dates back years to back when I was working at GameStop. So this has been going on for like at least 10 years. And I guess Nintendo's like, hey, let's get on board with our fancy limited edition NESs. I'm calling it now. I am calling it now. The NES Classic version 2 will be in stores next Christmas. And then, of course, that means that that's going to boost up the sales of which they don't even need to do. You can't keep it on the shelves. But that, they'll probably ship more NES Classic version 2s than they did the first one. I bet you they're going to make actually a decent number of them, but they'll sell out even better because now people know they're this limited edition product that they won't be able to get after Christmas. And so the thirst, the hunger for them will be even greater. And then they'll just claw each other's eyes out for them. And then that also means that the regular NES Classics get to be $1,000 on eBay, and it becomes a huge collector's edition. And I think Nintendo is just going to make money entirely off scalpers. In fact, the only other thing that would make any kind of sense with them discontinuing the NES Classic would be if Nintendo themselves were selling them on eBay under pseudonyms. It's the only other thing that makes sense. Otherwise, Nintendo's just stupid. And no, I think I'm just going... They might just be stupid, I'm not sure. But I'm going to pretend that one of the biggest video game companies and longest-running video game companies out there isn't that dumb. They've got something up their sleeve. Mark my words. So, that's my theory on what's going on with the NES Classic. Also, speaking of Nintendo, know what's weird? I think Nintendo's gone horse crazy. See, while I was getting everything together for this episode, I noticed that Nintendo put up a trailer for the Mario Sports Superstars on 3DS, which I really wish was on the Switch. Mario Sports Superstars being a collection of multiple sports games made by Camelot Software Planning, which are the Mario Golf and Tennis people. So they're good. And it's soccer, baseball, tennis. Soccer, baseball, tennis. I forget if it has golf or not. And then it has horseback riding. Now, they actually had horseback riding in some of the Mario and Sonic at the Olympic games, and that was actually pretty fun. And I noticed they put up a trailer for the horseback riding. I was like, okay, I'm going to watch this. And the trailer's amazing. Because they're trying to make it look super hardcore. They've got lightning bolts shooting everywhere, this pumping music, and they're showing this horse racing. And then they cut to caring for your horse and brushing its mane and putting flowers in its hair and accessories, and you can put little hats on your horse. And I'm just looking at this like, what? Wait, hang on. You're trying to do this super awesome lightning bolt-filled sports game collection thing, get excited for the Mario sports, and then you have this. And I'm laughing, but now I'm even more interested in getting the game because, well, again, the horseback riding in the Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games was actually pretty good. Like that, and brief detour there. I know we all remember the first Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games game was pretty much complete trash, but the series improved drastically after that, and then the frustration became some of the mini games were bad, and a lot of them were too simplistic, but then the few good ones would only have like one track. Like in the Wii U Winter Olympics game, the Dream Snowboarding was really, really good. And then you play it, and it's like, okay, where's more tracks? And then in the Rio Olympics one, they had BMX biking. And that was really, really good, and there was only one track. The racing games in those tended to be really good, and then you get frustrated because there's only one track and you want a full game of it. And now they've made a full game of horse racing with a horse care element, and I'm like, okay, now I'm actually intrigued. But what makes this all funny is that if you know anything about Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, that also has a horse racing element in it, where you can tame and catch wild horses and put flowers in their hair as well. It's become kind of a running joke because it's cool, but at the same time it's kind of goofy that all of a sudden Zelda has this deep horse care system. And I'm just sitting here going, Nintendo's just gone completely horse crazy, haven't they? I'm not opposed, I'm just a little baffled. I didn't see this coming. Okay. Nintendo, I am not going to stand in your way on that one. Anyway, looking at the time, I think, again, I do not let the local artists play nearly enough. I'm terribly sorry to all of our local artists. I really should give y'all some more. That was I'm a Lady by Megan Trainor, and this is 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave, diverse music for your diverse mind. I'm Jell. This is GameBabble Live, your video game news and information show, which airs every Wednesday from noon to 3 p.m. And we continue our discussion of Nintendo being Nintendo. So, as I was doing that report, I got word that some people are saying that Nintendo is going to do a Super Nintendo Classic next Christmas. However, I cannot find anything to substantiate these rumors, other than it being really, really freaking obvious. I was actually thinking about mentioning that was a possibility, but I was like, they haven't really finished with the NES Classic. But a lot of people, admittedly, there's more interest in a Super NES Classic, and there's a lot of people interested in that. The real question is if they're going to increase the price or not. Because I don't know anyone who would pay more than $60 for a Super. Then again, maybe that's why they're discontinuing it, making it so desirable that they could actually charge like $75 instead of $60, when as it is, $60 for an NES Classic is kind of a questionable price tag. Either way, yeah, there's rumors that sources close to Nintendo are saying Super Nintendo Classic could be coming next year. There's nothing official, nothing substantiated, but it's such an obvious move that it would happen. Either an NES or Super NES Classic next Christmas. You can bank on it. Anyway, let's talk about that Wonder Boy 3 remake, which just came out for the Xbox One, PlayStation 4, and most importantly, the Nintendo Switch. Most importantly because, Switch needs some games. So, Wonder Boy 3. It was an old Sega Master System game that certainly has a cult following. And it's a side-scrolling adventure RPG platformer type thing. Honestly, was probably one of the main inspirations behind the Shantae series. But anyway, Wonder Boy 3, The Dragon's Trap, was also interesting because it kind of begins at the end. Like, you're told, okay, you're a hero, you just fought your way through all sorts of hardships, you've made it to the final boss, you're gonna face this dragon, but little do you realize the dragon has the power to curse people. So you go through a very small sort of final dungeon, and you fight the Mecha Dragon, which in the original they just say it's a dragon, and it's kind of funny because, like, everything's made out of bricks, and you're like, okay, I'm going to fight the dragon, and then, you go left, and all of a sudden everything's, like, super high-tech, and you go through a door, the dragon is a freaking robot dragon, and you're like, why? But, and then, after you kill the robot dragon, though, its ghost pops out and curses you, and you turn into a lizard man. And the rest of the game is about you trying to return to human form while also, like, getting a bunch of other transformations. Like, okay, fine. Lizard Man, it can breathe fire. And then you turn into Mouse Man, and you're super small, and you can climb on walls. And then you turn into Piranha Man, and you can breathe underwater. And then you turn into Lion Man, and I don't even know what Lion Man does. And then eventually you turn back into a human, and which is actually written as Human. It's kind of goofy. It's interesting, and very surprising for a Master System game. The Sega Master System was such a weird console, because technically it was way more powerful than the NES, but very few games took advantage of it, and you didn't really see too much that really got people excited on the Master System. Other than Phantasy Star 1. Phantasy Star 1 was a very impressive game that holds up shockingly well today. But a lot of Master System games, like, they had more colors than the NES and way less flicker, and yet a lot of them felt more primitive. And I'd kind of say that about Wonder Boy 3. Looking at the original graphics, it's very basic and very sparse, but it has a great idea. Now, the remake redoes everything in HD, and it's all super gorgeous. And just to emphasize all this, you can actually switch back and forth between HD and retro with the push of a button. You hit R2, basically, to switch between the two graphic styles, and then you hit R3, clicking in the right analog stick, to switch between the two music styles. And actually, there's a third music style, because if you go to the options, you can choose if you want a regular Master System or a Master System with the FM synthesizer chip, which was sort of a Japanese thing. They released a thing that, like an add-on for your Master System, that made its music better and made it better at making better-sounding music. They released a new sound chip for it that, if I recall, you could buy separately. And you can turn that on to get better-sounding retro music, which, you get it, makes a huge difference. And it's so great just being able to switch back and forth between these two styles. And you can even switch on or off the retro sound effects. Because it also emphasizes just how much they were able to build on. I almost get why they wanted to remake this, because it was so sparse and so basic, there's tons of artistic freedom. Like, the first scene of the game is just hallway made of bricks. It is a straight line. And that's like where the game begins. You're at the beginning of the castle. Well, with the remade graphics, they turned it into a drawbridge that you're going through with mountains in the background, and it all looks super gorgeous. And then you get into the castle. You've got these detailed rooms, these layers of parallax scrolling, and the way it transitions from the regular bricks to the high-tech stuff, like, it looks phenomenal. And at the same time, though, it's perhaps a little too faithful to the original. Because when I got to Mecha Dragon, I tried to do, like, a jumping stab attack, right? Okay, jump up, hit him in the face, right? And he moved forward at that exact same time, and I wound up bouncing off his head, taking damage, like, 10 times. He got, like, 10 hits in on me, and I was like, okay, well, this is faithful. Also, the remake adds in the ability to play as a female character that they added, which is super cool. But I will say, apparently they've extended the end game because, of course, you get immediately cursed and turned into a lizard man. And unfortunately, yeah, there's no difference for the female character. All the transformed sprites are identical. They didn't even, stick some eyelashes on them. I would have stuck at least some eyelashes on them myself. But whatever. You still, the lizard man form and mouse man form, they all look exactly the same regardless of what gender of character you pick. But it was super cool that they added that in as a bonus feature. And I actually read the developers' blog about why they did that. Come to find out, they wanted to remake Wonder Boy 3 for, a long while. It was a little bit of a dream of theirs. And they were like, hey, they did that whole thing with Wonder Boy and Adventure Island where they just changed the names and they could, make the same game, just change out the character. So one of their original concepts was, well, what if we make, a random female character and have that instead of Wonder Boy? And then it's like, hey, you can't say it's Wonder Boy because it's a chick. Ah! And so they called up the original developer, was like, hey, would it be okay if we did this? And the original developer was like, you can just make a Wonder Boy game. They're like, oh, then we will. And the original developer goes off and makes a sequel, which will be called Monster Boy. I don't even understand. It's all goofy when it comes to Wonder Boy and naming schemes. But, yeah, it's neat. In fact, one other, you want to talk about, super awesome retro features, get this. If you played the original Wonder Boy 3 and you have, that one used password saves. If you still have your old Master System password for Wonder Boy 3, you can put it in and continue your game. So you can actually continue your game from, the 80s in the remake. And I think that's just the coolest feature. And it's super great, but the gameplay really hasn't changed in spite of the gorgeous HD graphics. And in some ways, that's good. It's nice to have a nice retro game. In other ways, it's you could have done more here. Because, you don't have a lot of attack options. You don't have, a downward stab or, you pretty much just stick your sword out a little ways or breathe a little bit of fire. And a lot of the enemies are, super basic in their AI where it says, I'm an enemy that runs at you. I'm an enemy that runs at you and hops occasionally. And there were a lot, I'm still very early in the game, but there's a lot of straightaways with just enemies running straight towards you. With how gorgeous the game looked, I actually thought for a minute that it could have been, the Shantae killer. I was like, oh, wow, this is actually kind of putting Shantae to shame. And then I actually played, I was like, okay, no, Shantae's still better. Which, oh, egad. I'm pretty darn pleased with, with Shantae, Half Genie Hero, and Pirate's Curse. They're both, all the games are great, but those are the two where the series really comes into their own. And admittedly, I donated a lot to the Half Genie Hero Kickstarter. I've been a fan since 2 years before the first game came out. So it's a long story kind of a thing, though. But yeah, Wonder Boy 3, Monster Boy's not out yet. Wonder Boy 3 remake, pretty neat. Pretty neat. Gorgeous graphics. Love the fact that I can switch back and forth between retro and modern graphics. I think that's a really, really cool thing. So let's see, look at the time. Yeah, we got time. Let's talk about Puyo Puyo Tetris. One of the goofiest things about the Nintendo Switch, continuing our theme of the Switch almost has games. This is the last thing I've got to work with for the Switch. So Switch time will be over after this. But I look at the games coming out on the Nintendo Switch, and I almost wonder if they just were like, so what's our target demographic? Gel? Anyone else? Nope, just gotta make sure he buys the console. Okay. Because, okay, get this. The console launches with Waku Waku 7, which is, I'm pretty infamous for my love of that game. It's my favorite 2D fighter of all time. It's the first official US release of Waku Waku 7. I may have it on every other console it's ever been released on, including the Neo Geo AES. I have the home cartridge, which those things are big, but it was I had to have it because I love Waku Waku 7. And so they're like, yeah, well, let's launch the system pretty much a week after launch. with Waku Waku 7. You know what else they put on there? They put on there freaking a new Blaster Master game, or a remake of the original. But they're like, yeah, let's slap Blaster Master on there. Okay, well, now you got me interested. And hey, let's make the Zelda game that Jell actually wants. Because I'm going to be honest, I haven't actually enjoyed a Zelda game since Link to the Past, because they started to become way too linear and way too puzzly, and not a fan of the puzzles. I remember, like, the thing I liked about Zelda was the exploration, and that just vanished. So now they're like, hey, here's this big open world Zelda that's, like, all exploration all the time. And I'm just like, okay, and I played it, and I'm like, okay, this is pretty much the Zelda I wanted. And then, the cherry on top, Puyo Puyo Tetris. We haven't seen a Puyo Puyo game in America since Puyo Pop Fever, which, by the way, screw that game. Fever 1 sucks. I hate Fever Mode, and Fever 1 was just terrible. But we haven't seen a Puyo game since Puyo Pop Fever, and that was back on the GameCube. And this is the first time Puyo Puyo has been called Puyo Puyo in America. Me and all the longtime Puyo fans were like crying tears of joy over this. And you might be sitting there wondering, what the crap's a Puyo Puyo? Okay, you might know Puyo Puyo a little bit better by its American names. Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine and Kirby's Avalanche. Also, Quirks? That was like the name of a PC version of it. But anyway, yeah. It's that game. It's Mean Bean Machine, it's Kirby's Avalanche. It's the game where two colored slimes fall from the top of the screen, and you have to match up 4 slimes in order to make them disappear. That game, yeah! Now you remember the one. Yes, darn near every time they try to bring it to America, they completely change the characters around. And I'm just sitting there going, can we get a real Puyo game? The first non-butchered Puyo Puyo game we got was just the LCD Puyo Lin game, which I found at Walmart for $8. It's literally like a Tiger Electronics version of Puyo Puyo, but it worked out really well. It's actually pretty darn good. I mean, you're limited to only 3 colors of Puyo, but for what it was $8 well spent. I love the thing. After that, we got the first one titled Puyo Pop was on the Neo Geo Pocket Color. It was the Neo Geo Pocket Color version of Puyo Puyo 2, but all the story elements were cut. It was unbutchered, gorgeous cover art, no story elements whatsoever. So the characters almost didn't matter. But then we got Puyo Pop on GBA, and that was the first one they did, in fact, the only one I'd say they did completely right. In Japan, it's called Mina de Puyo Puyo. It was one of the first ones Sega made after Compile went out of business, because the games are made by a company called Compile, but Sega half owned the rights, and then Compile went out of business and Sega owned the full rights, and they made Mina de Puyo Puyo on GBA, came to America as Puyo Pop, had all the original characters properly translated pretty much, one character name change that's kind of understandable, and it was here, and it was great, and I loved it. And then after that was Puyo Pop Fever, which I hate Fever. That was Sega throwing out all the old characters, trying to make up their new replacement characters, on top of adding in this thing called Fever Mode, and the presentation just kind of went to crap, and Fever Mode was completely broken, and the new characters just weren't that great. I just hated Fever all around, and then that was the last one we got. Skip ahead to now, and we finally get Puyo Puyo Tetris, which this is a thing people have been clamoring for since 2014, because the game came out in 2014. It was pretty much a Wii U launch title. I actually have it already on PlayStation 3. It's been around a while, and yeah, the concept of Puyo Puyo Tetris is that it is literally Puyo Puyo versus Tetris. So if you want a Tetris game and you don't care about Puyo Puyo, that's fine, get Puyo Puyo Tetris. Because you could just play Tetris, or you can just play Puyo Puyo. Pretty much, unless you're doing the story mode. But that's what it is. It's both of the puzzle games. Like, you can actually play it where one player is playing Puyo Puyo, and another player is playing Tetris, and they're going against one another. Or, there's a mode where you play Puyo Puyo, and then after a time limit, it switches to Tetris, and then it switches back to Puyo Puyo. And then there's another mode called, like, Tetra Puyo Mix, where Tetris blocks and Puyos are all falling at the same time, and you're playing both simultaneously with mixed rules, and it's utterly mind-bending. Needless to say, it has a lot of modes and options, and this makes me exuberant. Because once upon a time, there was a time when puzzle games weren't just, cheap casual games you played on your cell phone. There was a time when puzzle games were hardcore, when they were played competitively in tournaments, when they had character and personality, and a lot of that was because of the cost of manufacturing games. We didn't have downloadable games back then, so if you were going to make a puzzle game, it would have to be on, like, a cartridge, or in an arcade machine, or on a CD, and that wasn't expensive. That was expensive, and so you couldn't just sell a puzzle game for $5. You were going to sell a puzzle game, and it was going to cost $50, so you had to find a way to make a puzzle game worth $50, and that meant coming up with characters and story and flashy attack animations and presentation and tons of modes and options and all sorts of goofy stuff, and that's what it was like back in the 90s, and it was pretty cool. And then cell phones come along, and, well, now you can just give away your puzzle games for free, and if you're doing that, you don't have to put in the same amount of effort you did back in the 90s when you were trying to convince people that Tetris Attack was worth $50. Spoiler alert, Tetris Attack was totally worth $50. So, now it's good to see another game like that, where it's a nice, meaty puzzle game. And again, it's Puyo Puyo and Tetris. You are getting two puzzle games at the same time, and it has online competitive play, and it has offline play for up to 4 players, and it has a bunch of different characters and a goofy story mode, and it's really designed for Tetris players more than Puyo players. I learned the hard way, because, yeah, the story mode, it gives harder Tetris challenges, I feel, and has a lot more Tetris challenges than I was prepared for. And this actually brings up something funny. This isn't the first time we've had 2 puzzle games duking it out, especially not Tetris. Because way back on the Super Nintendo, we had Tetris and Dr. Mario, wherein it was the same thing, except it was Tetris and Dr. Mario instead of Tetris and Puyo Puyo. Which brings me to one of the weirdest things. Way back when what was his name? Alexei I can't remember. It's a Russian name. You know Tetris is from Russia. I forget the guy's name. But when the guy who made Tetris, didn't own Tetris because Soviet Union, Russian BS, the license for that game was kind of funny because Nintendo owned the U.S. distribution license for Tetris on home systems. Atari made the arcade one. Nintendo owned the home licensing rights. And in Japan, Sega owned the arcade and home licensing rights for Tetris. So that's why this, makes sense to a lot of people. And there's, apparently some stealth references to Sega's 1988 version of Tetris. But yeah, Puyo Puyo was Sega's puzzle game. They used to own the distribution rights for Tetris, and now they're clashing. So that's kind of interesting. I will say the presentation could use to be flashier. The attack animations are kind of kept in a small little box. I would have liked more backgrounds. And my biggest complaint is a complaint I've had since Fever. The Puyos don't blink. That probably sounds like the dumbest complaint in the universe, but it matters to me. Because one of my favorite things about Puyo Puyo is the fact the puzzle pieces are little slime blobs, and each one, depending on their color, had a different personality. Like, the yellow ones were super happy, and the red ones got angry, and the blue ones would cry all the time. And they'd sit there, and they'd, wiggle and shake and blink and do all these different animations while you're playing, and it was neat. And starting with Puyo Puyo Fever, they didn't do that anymore. They just stared blankly at you. And unfortunately, even though Puyo Puyo Tetris lets you choose from a wide variety of different Puyo and Tetris block visual styles, and you can switch back to a classic visual style for the Puyos, they don't animate at all. It's a minor thing, But I mean, after the sheer gorgeousness that was Puyo Puyon back on the Dreamcast, which is like the Street Fighter 3 Third Strike of puzzle games, complete with the difficult to parry super moves, I just miss it, okay? But, gonna set that aside, and we're going to enjoy Puyo Puyo Tetris, because it is caked with stuff. And by the way, yes, it has the Tetris theme. It is in there. You can choose to play to that theme. It could use more classic Puyo Puyo music from my experience, but I think there might be new content being added to the Switch release. Which brings me to the weird thing, which is the price. Well, not that weird. The game is actually coming on both Switch and PS4. And the PS4 release is only $30. Switch release is $40. Glad they're not going full price, especially since this is a game from 2014 that's being released in 2017. Why is that? Well, that's because, like I said, it's Puyo Puyo and Tetris simultaneously. That's like, I don't want to say $1 million idea, but it's an idea that sells, and more than likely making a Puyo Puyo Tetris 2 would probably involve some like convoluted licensing re-agreements and would take a lot of time. And people already love Puyo Puyo Tetris. It's Puyo Puyo, it's Tetris. They've ported it to like every other system in Japan right now. You know, it's been out for a while, and it's just such a winning formula. And then, Nintendo's like, hey, we got a new console that's coming out, Nintendo Switch. And Sega's just sitting there like, oh, wow, that thing needs games. What can we put on it super fast? Hey, how about that Puyo Puyo Tetris everyone loves? Oh, yeah, that's a perfect fit for the system. Bloomp, Puyo Puyo Tetris for the Nintendo Switch coming. But the twist was that since the Nintendo Switch's launch was so sparse, and probably the fact that Sega owns Atlus now, there's a merger there, and Atlus is known for translating lots of goofy, obscure Japanese games. Basically they were like, hey, how about we actually release this in America? Like, I thought there was no chance for Puyo Puyo to ever make it to America because of the fact that we didn't get Puyo Puyo Tetris. It's the That was Drive It Like You Stole It by Hudson Thames here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave, diverse music for your diverse mind. And this is Jell with GameBabble Live, your video game news and information show, which airs every Wednesday from noon to 3 p.m. We have spent the past, hour and a half now, talking about Nintendo, the Switch, it maybe possibly getting some games, things getting discontinued, so on and so forth. Am I out of Nintendo stuff? Pretty much. But last week, I mentioned that there is a new fighting game coming out for the Super Nintendo called Unholy Knight the Darkness Hunter, which is from some SNK staff members. And it's like, hey, you can pre-order it on Amazon. It's going to be $50, but it's going to be like a new Super Nintendo game. That's going to be awesome. Yeah, it broke. I'm going to be honest. Visually speaking, the game did not look that great in the first place. The fact that it only has 6 characters is pretty... But recently, some combo videos for it came out, showing that the game is probably not a very good fighter. Quite a few characters can just get you in a corner and jab spam, and it combos. Like, you just keep hitting weak punch over and over and over again with the right timing, and your opponent can't do anything. They lose all their health, they lose. Also, one of the characters has a move has a super that does 100% damage on cross-up. Cross-up is where you jump at an opponent and do an attack in mid-air when you're kind of behind them. Basically trying to hit them in the back of the head is sort of the idea. So if you jump up and right as you're going behind your opponent, you do this one air super, 100% damage. They instantly lose. Well, that's great. That's freaking wonderful. Good job. So hopefully they'll consider fixing that before release, because you can't patch a Super Nintendo game. I'm just saying. Otherwise, we might want to wait for Unholy Knight the Darkness Hunter Super Turbo. So, that's the thing. Also, hey, who likes Dead or Alive 5? Because, brief reminder, the Dead or Alive 5 costume contest is still going on until, I forget the day. Early to mid-May. So you've still got like a week or two to design your costumes. If you're unfamiliar, this is the thing that Koei Tecmo does every year, where you design a costume for your character of choice, send it to them, and then if they like the costume, they might do a vote on it, they might not. They will make it one of their Halloween costumes for that year. And yeah, it takes this long. They do the contest now, it ends in May, they figured things out, and then basically from probably the end of May until October, they work on making Halloween costumes for all the characters for that year based on the stuff you see. The rules are super lenient this year, it sounds like you could just design as many costumes as you want to for whatever character you want to, except for Mai Shiranui. No Mai Shiranui costumes, probably some kind of legal red tape that prevents that, which is a darn shame for a lot of people. But other than that, go crazy, design costumes, send them to Koei Tecmo, and they might show up in the game. You might get a couple prizes or something. What really matters is getting your costume in the game. So I need to sit down and design some. And for the record, artistic talent does not matter. I have seen some really awful MS Paint-looking drawings actually win and get the costumes made in-game, because they look a lot better in-game when you have, professional modelers making the costumes. So, quick reminder that that's happening. Also, in the off chance that anyone cares about Senran Kagura Peach Beach Splash, it got its 1.07 balance patch update, which is like the 7th update to the game. This makes me happy. They did the same thing with Festival Versus, honestly, because a company could just say, game's done, we're done. But this one, they want it to have a competitive online scene, so they've been patching the damage outputs and reload times and things on all the water guns in the game. The U.S. release will be sometime midsummer, so maybe it'll come out before all the patches are done. Who knows? But yeah, that's a thing that they do, and I'm glad to see them being on the ball here. The game's only been out for like a month or two, and it's gotten 7 balance patches, which I'm okay with. Now, time to talk about something that has me super excited. The Final Fantasy XII remake, which I believe is hitting in July. It's called Final Fantasy XII The Zodiac Age. And Final Fantasy XII is a game that makes me look... It's a game that makes me ask the question, is it possible for a game to be part of a long-running, beloved series, sell over 5 million copies, get a perfect score from some Japanese video game magazines, and still be considered underrated and overlooked? Because that's how I feel about Final Fantasy XII. A few years back, I was at ACEN, Anime Central Convention in Chicago, and this guy was doing this panel on what happened to video games, and he asked the question, what do you think is the most underrated Final Fantasy? And he blows my mind. He went with Final Fantasy X. He went with the one that is the most beloved in Japan, and the one that got a PS3 and PS4 re-release much sooner, and is like one of the most beloved Final Fantasies of like the modern era. Yeah, no, that one's underrated, totally. And someone came up with, Final Fantasy IX, because 9 is the one you traditionally think of as underrated, because it took years for people to actually come to appreciate that game. But the most amazing thing to me, he's talking about underrated Final Fantasies, and he only briefly mentioned 12 and utterly shrugged it aside. It was like, Final Fantasy 11 doesn't count. And then Final Fantasy 12 is basically just an offline Final Fantasy 11, and that's it. Completely ignored the thing. It's like, geez, you want to talk about underrated, and that's the way a lot of people are. Like, when I hear people complain about how Final Fantasy isn't as good as it used to be, they always talk about, 8 and 9 and 10 and 13. Wow, we're counting like Wonder Boy over here. It's like, wait, what happened to all those other games? Oh yeah, 11 was an MMO. Yes, we know that. What happened to 12? oh, well, 12 was just an offline 11. No one gives 12 the time of day. And it's amazing, even when it came out, I was sitting there like, so where's, like, all the figures? They only did, like, the basic characters. They didn't... Do you have any idea how many years it took them before anyone made a freaking Fran figure for that game? And I couldn't find the art book for it anywhere. There was barely any Final Fantasy XII promotion. And I remember there was a lot of negativity before release. Penny Arcade really didn't help with that, since they spent every year of that game's development complaining about it. Final Fantasy XII is really, really severely underrated. And I say this because it's actually my favorite 3D Final Fantasy, and it is not perfect. Like, the license system is a really good idea, but the execution was abysmal. We will talk about that because there are changes there that are very important. And I do think that it could have used a lot more character development, because the story was more about the politics of everything than about the characters. Then again, it didn't help that there were so many changes. Like Vaughn, the main character, wasn't supposed to be the main character. Bosch was supposed to be the main character. But they did a focus group test, and people didn't like Bosch because he looked too old and gruff and wasn't pretty enough, so he's still really story-wise closer to being the main character, but they just threw in Vaughn so that way they could have a pretty boy as the main character because they needed that. And so the quote-unquote main character honestly has nothing to do with the story. Honestly, I don't hate Vaughn. He's kind of the team cheerleader, but for the most part, after the beginning, he kind of stays out of the way of the story and just kind of cheers everyone on. At least he's happy, you know? At least he's not a mopey idiot. No, Vaughn's pretty okay. I kind of like Vaughn, but he's so not the protagonist of that game. Literally anyone else is more the protagonist of Final Fantasy XII than Vaughn is. But, yeah, so I really like Final Fantasy XII, and it's funny because I don't like MMORPGs, and it does play like an MMO. What's the big difference? I get to control my entire party. The biggest problem with MMORPGs is that I control one character, and all I do is click on an enemy and wait for it to fall over. In Final Fantasy XII, I can give orders to all my party members and have them attack different things. And this is, of course, where someone brings up the Gambit system, which is where you can kind of program an AI and get your characters to auto-battle, but that's completely optional, and I didn't use it much beyond just a basic idling. I much preferred to micromanage my characters. And I'm like, I'm going to play this way because this is the way I want to play, and I did, and I loved the game. Anyway, in spite of this fact, Final Fantasy XII was very pivotal, because if you played any of that, like, wave of Wii RPGs at the very end, all of them were blatantly inspired by Final Fantasy XII. Both Xenoblade Chronicles as well as The Last Story have very similar visual styles to Final Fantasy XII, and they both feature a character that looks like Vossler, which I just find hilarious. And their gameplay is really, really similar to Final Fantasy XII, and that's the thing that drove me completely up the wall. Because Xenoblade Chronicles, people raved about how great it was and how fantastic it was, and they friggin' loved it, and it was a good game, but when I played it, I was like, this is kind of like a worse version of Final Fantasy XII, and these exact same people didn't give 12 the time of day. The reason I say it's worse is because, hey, what'd I just say about why I like 12 over MMOs? Alright, because I get to control the whole party. Hey, guess what the problem is with Xenoblade Chronicles? I only get to control one character. And there's like this special ability where you get to, like, for a super move, you get to command your other characters. But in Xenoblade Chronicles, you only control one. Although, to its credit, Xenoblade Chronicles was a lot about teamwork, and much of how you play that game is about looking at what your computer teammates are doing and choosing the right response to support them, which is... It's a different way to play. But yeah, getting back to Final Fantasy XII, as I said, it is getting a HD remake re-release thing on PlayStation 4, and that makes me super happy. It'll be out in July. And yeah, Initially, people were saying that it was going to be based on the International Zodiac Job System Edition. Now, that's another weird thing to explain. See, in Japan, usually after the US release comes out, a Final Fantasy tends to get re-released as the International Edition with all the added US content, and it's usually completely in English. Final Fantasy XII did the same thing. They did an International Edition. It was completely in English, but they added more to it, namely the Zodiac Job System. And it's here that we have to talk about the license board and the job system. You see, in Final Fantasy XII, characters didn't really have jobs or classes. They had a license board. And when you beat an enemy, you got a license point. You spent license points to get different skills on this big old board. And you couldn't equip certain equipment unless you bought the license for it. And you couldn't use certain skills unless you bought the license for it. And this drove people nuts because they thought of it as literal licenses rather than skills. And they're like, what do you mean I have to buy a license to wear a hat? Then again, even looking at it as a skill set, like, I don't have the skill to put a hat on my head. What? But I thought it was a really cool idea on paper because what this meant was that you were building your class by buying these licenses, and you could become, more warrior-like or more mage-like, but at the same time, everyone had the same license board, so everyone could kind of become the same character, especially when you maxed out your license board. What was worse was that the license board was laid out by idiots. You could not see what licenses you were purchasing, which, okay, I'm fine with that if there was at least some vague sense of direction, but there wasn't. The licenses were just scattered all over, and the worst part was the big clump of stat-ups. Right in the middle of the board, there's like this huge pile of stat increases, HP ups, attack ups, speed ups, all this big clump. Well, guess what? Anyone who looks at, like, a list of what the license board contains, they make a beeline for the big stat clump, and then they give everyone the same big stat boost, and it gets stupid. And so they redid this with the Zodiac job system. The way that worked was they had 12 different jobs, and each one had a different specialized license board. So if you chose the fighter job, you would get a license board that's full of swords and HP and strength and defense ups. And if you chose the mage one, you'd get the one that has all the magic and stabs and stuff like that. Problem. Little bit of a problem here. This takes away all the customization. It is gone. It is like forced variety in your characters, because once you give a character their job, you can't change it at all. They're stuck with that job, and only that character can be that job. So whoever you choose to be the white mage, they are the white mage for the rest of the game. You can't change it if you don't like it. Tough cookies, and you just don't have the same freedom. On the flip side, they made it so the stat increases were greater. If you chose a mage job, you could get your magic stats higher than you could in vanilla Final Fantasy XII. They completely rebalanced the game. So I was kind of iffy on this. I spent a lot of time saying they need to give me a choice between the Zodiac job system and the original license board, because I'd rather play with the original license board. Zodiac job system sounds stupid because I want to give everyone katanas because I'm stupid like that. That's what I did in the game. I gave everyone katanas. First order of business, everyone get katana licenses. We're all going to be ninjas. And you can't do that anymore. But I have the best news. They are rebalancing Final Fantasy XII because they are changing the Zodiac job system. Now, you get 2 jobs. You get to have a sub-job. I don't know a lot about how this works. It hasn't actually been properly reported on in English yet. It was posted on a Japanese website, and you looked at the screenshot they had, and it said, like, 2 different jobs, one above the other. And they're completely rebalancing the game for the new job system. And this makes me so happy. And of course, people look at it and they go, well, this is so obvious. You can just cover up your weakness by picking, like, the parallel opposite job. So, okay, this job doesn't have a lot of intelligence, so I get this job that has a bunch of intelligence, and now everything's all well-rounded and good. Well, yeah, you could do that. Or you pick 2 similar jobs, and they boost one another. You know? You pick a fighter and you pick a monk, and all of a sudden the HP and strength boosts are through the roof, and you're just a real brawling powerhouse. More than that, it means that your white mage doesn't get screwed. That's the most important thing, because you need a white mage. You need a healer. But it sucks to have this one character who the only thing they can do is heal. Come on. But you get a white mage, black mage hybrid. Okay, that's good. White mage, monk hybrid. That's good. White mage, literally anything else hybrid. And you're in business. As long as it's not just heals for days. That was Body Like a Back Road by Sam Hunt here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave, diverse music for your diverse mind. And I'm gonna keep taking a break, but I just, sometimes you hear a song and you just have to say something. That is the weirdest attempt at a compliment I've heard in a while. Body Like a Back Road. Okay, If that works for your girl, that's fine. I don't know. It kind of sounds like an insult to me. I think your choice of words is questionable. That's all I'm saying. You know what? Hello, you are listening to 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave, diverse music for your diverse mind. That was The Fighter by Keith Urban featuring Carrie Underwood. And this is GameBabble Live, our video game news and information show, which airs every Wednesday from noon to 3 p.m. I'm your host, Jell, and as we've talked about today, we talked about the fact that the Nintendo Switch is almost maybe kind of getting some games. Talked about how the new Super Nintendo fighter Unholy Knight the Darkness Hunter is completely broken. Talked about the Wonder Boy 3 remake and that it is very, very faithful and very pretty, and being very faithful means that it still has some very Master System-tastic hiccups to it. I also mentioned that the DOA 5 costume contest is still going on. Nintendo is apparently crazy for horses. And the Final Fantasy XII remake has me very excited, which, whew, I forgot what a touchy subject Final Fantasy is. As I was talking about that, I was getting some strange looks. Then again, I might have been getting some strange looks for my hand gestures, because I gesticulate a lot. I kind of wish there was a camera in here to see my hand gestures. I don't even need a mouth sometimes. It's just, woo! I'm very excited for the Final Fantasy XII remake. Just, look, give 12 a chance. That's all I'm saying. I really liked Final Fantasy XII. So, that covers a lot of the things. I also talking about my love of Puyo Puyo and how Puyo Puyo Tetris comes out next week. Super excited about... Oh! Crap! I almost forgot about the PlayStation VR report. I knew I was forgetting something. Yes, every week I do the PlayStation VR report, where I talk about how the PlayStation VR exists in a bizarre zone between success and failure. And this week is no exception. Why do I consider this segment of the show important? Well, like I've said in the past, it's because I love the PlayStation VR, and thus I spend a lot of time looking up what's coming out for it. But also, in doing so, I realize that virtual reality isn't getting a lot of mainstream push anymore, mostly because the early attempts left really bad tastes in people's mouths. So, yeah, like, when the HTC Vive came out, there was nothing on it, because HTC isn't really a game developer, so they had to rely on indie developers who knew they weren't going to make any money off of this, so they released a lot of low-budget tech demos with ridiculously high prices to the captive Vive audience, and so you had a bunch of people who were like, what the crap, I paid $1,000 for this setup, and all I'm doing is basically playing Wii minigames? Screw this. Now, things are evolving a lot more. Things are looking better, but virtual reality is still preposterously expensive, and now people are super skeptical about it. So what came out this week was HeroCade and VR Invaders, and also there's that Something 6 Combined Arms game that's supposed to come out today. Also, a patch for Race the Sun on PS4 was released, which allows you to play Race the Sun in VR, which is kind of an endless runner. It's an endless flyer game that a lot of people have said very positive things about, and now you can play it in VR. Hooray! So let's talk about HeroCade, because, was that a disappointment? The idea behind HeroCade was that was going to be a collection of 9 VR games in a single bundle for $15, and the shtick was that they're all tied together with this meta-narrative about you being player one and trying to escape. And what it is like the HeroCade is presented as like a retro game collection in the future, where you have this like AI ball saying, oh, here's some games from the early days of VR before it became what it is today. And, oh no, the program is corrupted and now you're trapped in the VR and the only way to escape is to reach the minimum score threshold in all 9 games. Okay, whatever. Unfortunately, what really kind of annoys me about HeroCade is that they kind of sell it as a sampler platter of quote-unquote everything VR has to offer, all in one nice little package. And that's beyond depressing, because most of these games were released on Gear VR. Most of them were also free. Now, I will say, if there were at least 3 good games on HeroCade, that would make the whole package worthwhile. Unfortunately, there's just kinda okay games. And 2 of them are nearly identical. Now, those are the 2 that actually use the PlayStation Move. You've got, like, Jurassic the Hunted, which is a game where you're standing in place and it's dark and dinosaurs come out and you shoot them with a handgun. And the way you hold the gun is a little bit awkward, and the dinosaurs come super slow. Like, you're supposed to use the 3D audio to try and find them, but the game is just really boring and slow. And then there's Alpha Turkey Hunt, wherein a bunch of paper turkeys come at you and you shoot them. And it uses the exact same guns and gun control and gameplay, except it's less crap. They throw a lot more turkeys at you than they threw dinosaurs at me. So, that's 2 games that were kind of bleh. Polyrunner is basically a, like, crappier version of Race the Sun. It's like, yeah, it's okay. Then there's, like, a Space Invaders in VR. And it was sort of slow and bleh. And this is not bad, but this is okay. The biggest problem is that you can only shoot 2 bullets at a time, which is standard Galaga rules. But those bullets move way too slowly and take forever to hit the target, and so the game's just kind of bleh. I didn't get to spend enough time with it. A lot of people are saying Dread Halls is really, really good, which is some kind of horror game where you're in this randomly generated maze full of monsters and things. Sisters is supposed to be good but really slow, and those are 2 horror games, so of course those turn out good. There's a puzzle game in there. I haven't really gotten to really sit down with it, but I played, like, all the games I was really excited to try, and I'm like, wow, these are slow and boring. This is kind of sad. Slow and boring kind of describes a lot of the games in HeroCade. It's really not great. Thankfully, we also got VR Invaders. Technically VR Invaders Complete Edition. This has been out on, like, the Vive and the Oculus and everything else for a while. Now it's been ported to the PlayStation 4. And it is a gallery shooter type of game where you just stand in one place and they throw enemies at you. You use the 2 move controllers as a gun and a shield, and you shoot down invaders. And sort of the shtick is that there's a good variety of enemies, and they move in Galaga-type patterns, and they're constantly shooting at you and moving around, and you can intercept the bullets in midair, and it's very polished, very nicely made, looks nice, smidge on the overpriced side considering what it is, but it is actually pretty fun. I look forward to spending more time with it. Unfortunately, for some reason, one of my controllers kept, like, rotating slowly to the right as I played, And I don't know why, because I wasn't having this problem with any other PlayStation VR game. So the move tracking is a little bit questionable in this one. Again, it's a port from like Vive and Oculus, and I'm guessing they probably need to do a little bit of touch-ups on the different motion tracking controller that works very similar to the ones they're familiar with, but not quite. All in all, yeah, VR Invaders is pretty okay, but while it's more polished than Mortal Blitz, oh my god, I still prefer Mortal Blitz. I need to sit down and do my Mortal Blitz review. Because I've already got a Corix review written up. I need to, like, splice it together and make an episode, and then I need to do one for Mortal Blitz. I'm thinking I'm going to spend more time with VR Invaders and try to make it a double whammy, so that way, like, I can talk about both of them, because they're both kind of similar shooter games, and compare and contrast them, because I think they're a good comparison and contrastism. Probably the finest of the stand-in-place gallery shooters in VR versus the one that actually tries to be Time Crisis but falls ever so slightly short of the mark. I think that's going to be a fun comparison. So yeah, that's about where I'm at there. Of course, we're coming up on May, so that means that Star Trek Bridge Crew and Farpoint are on the horizon. And yeah, that's where we're at. That Whatever 6 Combined Arms, obviously haven't played it, not sure if I will. It looks like it's a port of a Vive game, so I don't know. And I know next week a weird puzzle game about having your hands stuck inside a box called Static is coming. Hello and welcome back to GameBabble Live here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave, diverse music for your diverse mind. That was Botanist by Contact. And this is GameBabble Live, your video game news and information show, which airs every Wednesday from noon to 3 p.m., which means we are slowly but surely coming up on the end of the hour and the end of the show, so we should recap some things. But before I do that, I finally found out what Bandit 6 Combined Arms is. It is actually a double pack of the original Bandit 6 and the second Bandit 6 game, which were both Gear VR games. One of them, you're a tail gunner, and it has kind of realistic graphics. The other one, you're manning a ground turret, and it has cel-shaded graphics, which is kind of weird. But either way, it's a shooty game. I'm kind of curious what the price of that thing is. But yeah, that's where we're at. Also, new game was, new game was announced for PlayStation VR that should be coming out soon, called Quiz Night Tonight, which is some kind of weird quiz game VR challenge thing. Could be fun. And also, Corix, which is that strategy game I've been talking about for PlayStation VR, is getting a new patch today that's supposed to add some crazy new features. I'm excited to see what they have, and I love the fact that the guy making the game is putting this much love into it. Then again, he quit his job to work full-time on the game. Yeah, Corix is kind of interesting due to the fact that it is made almost entirely by one guy. Like, he got someone to do the music for him and a few other things, but for the most part, it's like one guy who quit his job to work on a VR real-time strategy game. And, he's doing what he can. The problem is that I looked at the high scoreboard. It's not really high score. It's like some kind of weird league ranking thing they have set up, and last time I checked, there were only like 300 people on that board. So, that poor guy. Ooh, so, as we are wrapping these things up, let us do the big recap, which is how I love to end the show. So, the biggest news was the fact that the Nintendo Switch is getting kind of some games. I mean, we've got Puyo Puyo Tetris next week, which is a great combination of two puzzle games that taste great together. ARMS is scheduled for June, and they've added a new character in 2-on-2 modes. That's looking good. Splatoon 2 will be in late July, and we'll have a Horde mode. They've announced a game called NBA Playgrounds, which is not going to replace NBA 17 or 18 or whatever. It's going to be a separate NBA game that looks like it's going to be Switch exclusive. Hopefully it'll be like NBA Street. That would be nice. There's going to be a Monopoly on the Switch. Also, Namco Museum on Switch, which will have games like Galaga 88 and Rolling Thunder 2 and Splatterhouse, so that's all super nice. However, most of what I saw at that Nintendo Direct was 3DS games like Ever Oasis, Cul-de-Sac Revolt, Fire Emblem Echoes, Miitopia, and Hey Pikmin. So it's nice to see that the 3DS isn't being abandoned, but oh egad, I wish that the Nintendo Switch had 3DS support. Although, one thing I want to say about the Nintendo Switch, I love the cartridges. I really, really deeply love the cartridges as a console game fan, as someone who collects console games. I love the cartridges because they work like cartridges. You pop them in, and there's no installation, you download patches for a few of them, but for the most part, you just pop it in and you just go. The content is on there, and it loads pretty quickly, and it's nice. It's very nice. I love having cartridges again. I just hope that they're affordable to make. Let's see. Also, I was mentioning the fact that Nintendo is weirdly obsessed with horses, because apparently there's a whole lot of horse racing and grooming and putting hats and flowers on your horses in, what's that game called? Mario Sports Superstars on the 3DS. And then you also kind of do that in Zelda Breath of the Wild. It's optional, but it's kind of funny that Nintendo's so obsessed with that. Mentioned the Final Fantasy XII remake, and the fact that it is not just going to be the International Edition with the Zodiac job system. It will have a new dual job system, which has me very excited because that sounds way more tantalizing. Holding up my little sign here saying, give 12 a chance. Wonder Boy 3 remake. It's very pretty and very faithful to the original. I love the fact that I can switch back and forth between retro and modern graphics, and the fact that it has the FM audio chip as an option. That's super nice. By the way, that new Super Nintendo game from the ex-SNK developers, Unholy Knight, The Darkness Hunter, looks like a broken pile of crap. Go look up some combo videos for it. It's hilarious. And, yeah, I talked about the PlayStation VR and how much of a disappointment HeroCade is, which everyone, I had to check out the PlayStation VR Reddit because that's kind of necessary. That's where you get most of your PlayStation VR news, really, because no one else is really covering it very well. And yeah, a lot of people disappointed in HeroCade. I'm actually looking forward to reviewing HeroCade, just because it's such a mess. I haven't really gotten... I haven't really sat down and reviewed a bad game in a while, and while HeroCade isn't bad, it is an embarrassment. That's a way I would describe it. An embarrassment. Like, it works, it's okay, there's a few okay-ish games you can poke around with on it, but yeah, as like a sample, it bills itself as a sampler platter for what you can do in VR, and then you actually get in there and it's like, wow, these are not great. So that's a thing, and it would be good to look at that, alongside things. Because like I mentioned, I do have a YouTube channel, and if you want to find it, just look up GameBabble on YouTube, and you will bump into it one way or another. And the actual channel is like YouTube/user/GameBabble show. But admittedly, I don't update enough, because, well, it's not monetized at all. So, because I don't really have any viewers, and as such, it's, just sort of a thing I do on the side. And, yeah, because of this, because of the amount of work that actually goes into producing an episode, especially when you're flying solo and you don't have any editors or anything, that generally takes a good week of solid work when you're not being distracted by a million other things, like, setting up a schedule for your radio show and talking to friends and actually playing the video games you want to review. That all takes up a bit of time, and so, yeah. But, as such, when I review games, they generally tend to be games that I like and that aren't being looked at by other people. I've actually made one of the running jokes amongst my friends is 3.5 out of 5. Because that is the most common score I give on my show, and I stand by that score. Because, the reason I stand by that score is because a 3.5 out of 5 is, exactly the kind of game that gets me wanting to talk about it. Because that's one that's above average enough that there's something there that really has me intrigued, but it's not good enough that I'd give a full-on recommendation or that it would actually get a lot of buzz from other people. So I generally tend to be like, wow, look at this 3.5 out of 5. Let me tell you about it. That's my show more often than not. But as such, I generally tend to be very positive. I don't really review bad games very often, and bad game reviews are the stuff that's way more entertaining. So I need to do that. After I get Korix and Mortal Blitz out of my system, we will look at, I will see about reviewing HeroCade, and I still haven't even done the episode where I actually talk about VR. And I'm making empty promises. But we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. You never know. You never know what life will throw your way, right? Anyway, let's see. It is 2:43. I am about out of things to talk about. I mean, I could talk about snowboard. I'm going to talk about snowboard kids. Because, weird thing, you ever notice how there's just sort of a vibe in the air and everyone just sort of starts doing the same thing independently? Apparently, I was talking to a friend of mine about the fact that I need to buy a new N64 controller. And she was like, what the crap? We were just hooked up our N64 too to play some Diddy Kong Racing. It's like, so everyone just feeling like some N64 right now or something? Anyway, the reason I set it up was because I wanted to spend some more time with snowboard kids, kicking around, maybe a retrospective, maybe not. Either way, I finally completed my collection of that game because I imported the one Japanese-only game and finally picked up a copy of the first game because I pretty much just rented that a lot. And if you're unfamiliar, Snowboard Kids was a very good idea. It was literally a combination of snowboarding and Mario Kart. So you're going down a mountain, you're on a snowboard, you're doing tricks, and then you, throw snowballs at people that turn them into snowmen and drop washing pans on their head that flatten them and stuff. It's super fun, and I loved it. But the funniest thing is that it really wouldn't be a hard game to top. Honestly, as a snowboarding game, it's mediocre. Not bad. Mediocre. It's passable. It's a snowboarding game. What makes it is the Mario Kartisms. The item throwing and the crazy stage design and the wacky characters. That's what really makes it. Even the characters are kind of they're pretty much just anime cliches, except they gave them big noses and try to pass them off as cartoon characters. It's a little goofy. But that's what really makes the game, is the Mario Kartisms. And the entire time I'm just sitting there going, and it's one of those, you don't really know what you have till it's gone. Back when that game came out, I was like, I like this game. This game's good. Okay. But then it's years later, and I'm like, okay, we haven't had a snowboard kids in years. And now I'm looking at it, and I'm like, that was a really fun game. I wish someone would make that again, but, better. And then no one does. I know of, one Snowboard Kids knockoff. And that's a game called Snowboard Riot that was a WiiWare download. And it gave me what I wanted, which was Snowboard Kids on a balance board. Unfortunately, funny story, WiiWare games, the downloadable games for Wii, yeah, they've got a 50 megabyte limit on them because of the limited storage space on the default Wii. So you could only make 50 megabyte games. That meant that the game was super sparse. It had 4 characters and I don't even know how many stages, maybe 3 stages. It was really sparse. But yeah, that was the only game. It wasn't even that great, but it was the only game that was like Snowboard Kids, recently. The closest other one would actually be Mario and Sonic at the London Olympics on Wii, which, funny story, guess who made that game? The Snowboard Kids team. it surprised me too. I was looking at the credits that's like, developed by Rackdim, and I'm like, really? The Snowboard Kids team? Huh. So, yeah, it's a goofy thing. But the thing that actually makes this retrospective look at Snowboard Kids really interesting to me, this is like my favorite part about this thing, is the Japanese-only game that I mentioned was Snowboard Kids Plus, which was a PS1 port of the original Snowboard Kids, which came out a month before Snowboard Kids 2 came out on N64. And it was like, oh wow, this is kind of neat. They've added in 3 or 4 new characters. It has an anime opening sequence and some cutscenes. They added in, like, alternate costumes you could buy. So it seems like a big enhancement until you really sit down and compare them side by side. And the N64 game actually plays a lot better. The PS1 game is only 2-player instead of 4-player. It has significantly worse graphics and ran, like, way slower. Like, it has really bad slowdown issues. And I'm like, really? And then I thought about it, and I'm like, wait a second. How many games have I seen that are developed for the Nintendo 64 and then were ported to the PlayStation 1? I looked around, the only other one anyone can name is Glover. And Glover, like, that was released on N64 and PC, so the PC release is probably the best of them, but I do hear the PS1 version isn't as good as the N64 version. But, yeah, so Snowboard Kids is the only one where it was just, like, designed specifically for N64 and then ported to PS1. Usually when a game was on both PS1 and N64 back then, it was an arcade port, and so each one would have its pros and cons, and the PS1 would usually come out on top because of the increased storage space, and they could throw in a bunch of extra stuff. But in this one case, it's very different. Yeah, the N64 version of the game runs way smoother, like, it's a solid frame rate, it's 4-player, and the graphics look better. It has better textures. I think it has a slightly better draw distance. Hard to tell because, of course, the N64 used its infamous fog, which worked really well for Snowboard Kids. But the biggest thing I know is not only were the textures better on N64, which is really weird, but the lighting effects. The PS1 version barely had any lighting effects. Like, it was very basic shading. And I look at the N64 one, it's like, oh, this is shaded much better and has really good lighting. Would you look at that? N64 was such a weird console like that, wasn't it? Because it was like, on paper, it should be more powerful than the PlayStation 1, and yet PS1 games always wound up looking better, whether we Nintendo fans want to admit it or not. Usually this was because of textures and just the sheer amount of storage space that they had available. Creative texture work can do a lot of amazing things, and then the storage space, you can store more textures and a longer game, and, all the cutscenes and voice acting and fancy orchestrated music, and it all came together to usually make the PS1 better, but the N64 on paper is a far more powerful system, and it's interesting to finally see, like, one game where that actually feels like the case. Like, God, the slowdown on Snowboard Kids on PS1. And that one is not graphically intensive. Like, visually speaking, that game is real basic. So, okay. I think that about wraps everything up. Thank you. I'm gonna bow out now here at about 2:50. Thank you so much for listening to GameBabble Live here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. And I am going to get you back to that diverse music. So please, enjoy, stay tuned, and thank you for listening. Coming up next is Icy Fire by Ed Sheeran. Thank you very much. There's actually another show after me. I think it's Arcane9, but I haven't really talked to her to figure it out. So you should probably stay tuned after this. Stay tuned after 3, see what happens, because I think things are going to get interesting. Either way, I'm Jell. This has been GameBabble Live. Tune in next Wednesday from noon to 3 p.m. for more GameBabble Live. Thank you for listening. Now please enjoy some music.